Today on Type 5 Talks, we've got Jed Thian. For those of you who don't know, Jed is the creator behind the alternative rugby commentary, amongst a few other things, which is something that was very cool, very big deal to me. And finding rugby and getting to watch a bit of international rugby with some local flair. So we're going to have Jed on with us. Jed, are you there? Kia ora, Jed.
Kia ora, brother.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Good for a Sunday.
Good for a Sunday, yeah. Well, hey, thanks for stopping in and taking some time to chat with me today. I really appreciate you.
Oh, hang on. Sorry, Jacob.
Yeah, that's all
Let
right.
me just get rid of my Sunday morning worship music. That's the end of Elvis for the day. Okay. Where's he at? Not turning on. G'day.
Was good. Hey.
Kia ora.
How are you?
Good, brother.
Yeah. So thanks again. Thanks for stopping in. I really appreciate it. In true Kiwi fashion, you've been super humble and very nice to talk to. And I can't thank you enough for stopping in and lending some credibility to this thing I've been calling a podcast.
Yeah, well, what little credibility I've got is all yours, mate. So you're welcome to it. No, good. Good to bridge the final gap, or almost the final gap, I guess, after seemingly quite a long time. I've been keeping an eye on the Type 5 Sevens. It's been a fantastic idea. Of course, you know, us front rowers being the natural athletes that we are.
Chosen few.
Mate, it's a heavy burden to bear.
It's the hardest thing, I think, to be perfect. Yeah, so the idea is obviously like not mine, you know, and there was
so that's like every idea.
Yeah. Trying to perfect it, I guess, and trying to.
What do you think? Larry Flint was you think he was a genius?
Yeah, well, he's great in execution, though, right? Like he was.
Yeah, you can't complain about that.
Yeah, he did his solemn best, I think, to bring joy to everyone. But yeah, like there was one in Hamilton, New Zealand, and when I was there, and just like an absolute, it was on the beach, you know, so it was great fun and very casual, and there were sort of legends, you know, and walking around and playing and getting a run on the beach, and you thought, you know, to myself, like, this is just absolutely amazing, you know, like what a great time. I couldn't believe that it hadn't been done anywhere like in America really to speak of. And the first one I did was in just you know, like our wives and our girlfriends, you know, it was like 6 teams and like an all Polynesian barbarian team from San Francisco area. Like,
oh yeah, watch out. So keep your head down.
Yeah, there was a few of them there, and they like, oh, sorry, bro, we only have this much. You know, I had like 60% of the team fee. It's like, yeah, great, like come on in, and just had the best time. And then the next year it was like 11 teams, and then a couple of years in a row before all this stuff, you know, I had like 20 teams and several hundred people there. And,
really?
Yeah. Out. So obviously the concept and again, like the execution, I think was probably what set it apart, and having stuff for the whole family for the whole day, you know, not just watching dad get slung around on the field and then, you know, just chopping piss afterwards. Like there was stuff to do. So it makes it quite easy as a sell to your family, right? Like you're going to be at the field for 10 hours a day. If there's like balloons and bounce houses and stuff like that, then the kids are entertained and someone isn't looking after them nonstop. You know, it makes it easy.
Yeah, nice one. That's cool, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Obviously not doing too much of that these days. So the podcast was something like to sort of keep the rugby blues away, because season cut short, you know, everyone's season cut short, but we were sort of went to training on a Tuesday and then wasn't allowed to come back on Thursday. And that was sort of it. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's been well, to go with a cliche, it's been a difficult year for everyone.
Yeah.
Including the referees.
Including the referees. That's right. They make it tough for everyone. Like they should have to do something. Yeah. But well, I just so you're living in Asia now, in Hong Kong and the like.
Yeah, I first travelled to Asia in 2005 with an old girlfriend, and then came back in 08 when the All Blacks played Australia for the first time in the Bledisloe Cup on neutral ground.
Right.
They played that game in Hong Kong, and that was at the time of the Rugby Roundtable, and the alternative rugby commentary had kicked into gear after a pretty successful run through the UK in 2007. So we'd been, I wouldn't say embedded with the All Blacks, but the New Zealand Rugby Union were quite happy for myself and the production guys and the ARC to be pretty close to the All Blacks, like close to the normal media. And the first week was a stop in Hong Kong, and it was just fascinating. It was, Hong Kong in 2008, just after the global crash, it was still sort of humming in Hong Kong. The only kind of sort of indication that the global financial crisis had struck was Lehman Brothers had been building a massive skyscraper on the Kowloon Peninsula. And so there was on the island side, you had IFC 2, which was this towering colossus on the island, and they were going to match one off with it on the Kowloon Peninsula. So you had these two huge buildings acting like symbols of financial guardians of the Asian market, so to speak. Well, the top 20, I think, floors of the Lehman Brothers building stopped being built, and they knocked it on the head there. And now the Ritz-Carlton has taken the building over, and I think the highest bar in the world's there at like 100 floor 101 or something like that. You can go up and go on the viewing deck and buy a $50,000 gin and tonic if you want to.
Maybe something local.
Yeah. But it was, I remember having a great time that week. There was a lot of stuff that we did. We got into a bit of mischief, as you can imagine. There was a reason we gave it a couple of good nights out. Met up with the All Black front row committee midweek for a little bit of a shakedown, just to make sure those guys knew what they were doing come Saturday. And what we experienced during the week was just unbelievable. Wednesday night we had a wee go at it. Thursday night we had a proper go at it. And Hong Kong was booming. Friday was, before the game, it was as big as I'd ever seen anywhere in New Zealand. I've never seen anything like it, basically. There was just, it looked like a New Year's Eve. The town was just heaving. And then we had Saturday, and we went back because we were partying in the Central District around Lang Kwai Fong and Wyndham Street, and these have been names, and people who are familiar with Hong Kong will understand where we're at. And there was just, how are we all for language here?
Fine, yeah, all good.
Oh, there were fucking people everywhere, bro. I mean, every fucking where. And it was just, I was freaked out. And I remember we were drinking at the Irish pub there called Solace, it was called at the time. And I said to the Irish guy that owned it, I said, how's bells, mate? I can't believe how into it these Hong Kong people are with their rugby. I mean, the All Blacks have been here, and the Wallabies are here, and just fucking look at all these people. The town is crawling. And he's looked at me and gone, what? And I said, look at them. They're everywhere. All these people have come out for the rugby. He's just looked at me going, it's fucking Halloween, you idiot.
That's right.
I had another close look, and I was like, you're fucking right. Yes, that's right. They're all dressed like ghosts. Okay. Penny dropped. And, that was just where I was at the time with rugby. I had my head up my own ass, typical Kiwi rugby fan. There was nothing bigger than the All Blacks. There was nothing bigger than the Bledisloe kind of deal. And, it wised me up in that moment. It wised me up. I thought, shit, this is the town for me, for sure. Yeah. And, funnily enough, when I got eventually to Hong Kong full time in 2012, and I say full time in Hong Kong. I bounce around the region a lot, carrying out different commentary jobs and what have you. But you find out over time how critical and how central to the Asian rugby story Hong Kong really is. I mean, Japan is there, but Japan, they act of their own accord, basically. They don't really have fuck all to do with the rest of Asia. And yes, it's because they're too good. People go, why is that? Well, Japan they're not in the room next door. They're in the 5-star hotel down the other end of town. Right, yeah. That's how good they are. And the rest of Asia just can't catch them. Every now and then, South Korea might give them a fiddle in the sevens, but sevens and 15s, it's a different beast. And that team that Jamie Joseph has created for the World Cup and the legacy I think that they'll leave over the next decade is like, there's nobody in Asia that comes near them. So rightly so, they don't look back at Asia, they look forward at Europe, and they look at the All Blacks, and they look at the US, and they're external in their thinking. Hong Kong, on the other hand, has been a primary driver for the game throughout Asia. So it's been pretty fascinating to sort of read up and understand more of how Hong Kong has incrementally driven rugby through Asia, and then seeing, I guess, now the genuine signs of feedback from those sort of countries, Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Korea. It's an exciting region. Look, I'll tell you what, when I first went there, I thought this is going to be sweet. I'll do 4 or 5 months back in New Zealand. I'll do 3 or 4 months up in the UK. I'll sit on my ass and do fuck all in Asia and stay warm. They got rugby in Asia nearly 11 months of the year.
Yeah, it doesn't get cold.
dude, and don't get me wrong, it's not all the greatest rugby you've ever seen in the world. But, when you go to Phuket or Bangkok, or, you go to Vietnam and the Philippines, Cebu, you go to some of these places, you say, wow, it could be worse, could be a hell of a lot worse.
You could be watching some great rugby in the fucking cold of Edinburgh, eh? Like,
oh yeah. Well, that's exactly the formula, Or you could be in central Otago where the ground is frozen in the morning, and the boys trot out on Molyneux Park at Alexandra for a good old fashioned game of up the jersey.
Crunch, 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 crunch on the snow.
You know it.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing too. Just to touch on that is. Hong Kong Sevens is the only stop, right, where they add 8 teams and they add more of that regional flair, and obviously they get pumped by some of these top 16 teams that have to sort of fight for survival on the IRB 7 circuit. USA pretty familiar with that, sort of being in that bottom rung for a while, and then all of a sudden in the top rung. But I think that was always something special, is about Hong Kong, was that it was 3 days. So it's Friday to Sunday, and there's 24 teams instead of 16, and it gives some of those countries a chance to measure themselves. I think is like what the game and the community should also ultimately be about. Is like, yeah, we've got these teams on the upper echelon. There's an obvious sort of separation there in play and resources and whatever, and then but those tournaments, I think giving those guys a crack, I think is really what we all want to see in the end of the day. So that's pretty cool to hear.
Hong Kong Sevens is, it's a shame it's been knocked off to November. I don't hold much hope of it being kicked off for November. I think they might knock it off for another year. I don't think, this is purely my thoughts on the Hong Kong Sevens. It's a fantastic tournament. It's the party that started the party, right? So, and it's about so much more than just the rugby. It's the old adage in Hong Kong that if you get bored at the Hong Kong Sevens, you can turn around and watch the rugby. Which is it works, and they've been, I know that they've been struggling behind the scenes to commercialize it the way they used to. I mean, businesses and corporates don't go on the big junkets and donuts like they used to, and you can't sort of, if you're corporate, you can't run a conference for 200 people and swing them into town, and plaster them with fucking booze and take them out and have a good time, and then down to the sevens. That sort of stuff's kind of tut now. You can't really do that. But in saying that, given the right acts and give it the right entertainment, a lot of the tutting will turn into hands up. I want to buy a ticket there. So, I think the interesting thing is COVID's going to force everybody to look at what they're doing and make it change, make it work. And that's going to force some rethinking. It's going to force some new ideas into the mix. People or organisations are going to have to take some risks before they find their way through it all. So, look, there's only two parts of the Hong Kong Sevens that need to be right. A, the tournament has to be in Hong Kong, and B, Fiji. Right, that's it. It's a tale of two islands, basically.
Yeah.
And as long as Hong Kong's got a tournament, Fiji will go there. And people go, oh no, you can't do that. And people will rattle off a whole lot of, oh yeah, but then this would happen to Fiji and that would happen to Fiji. And Fiji, quite frankly, doesn't give a fuck what happens, because Fiji's Fiji, basically. And if you watch them on the pitch, you see these guys do inexplicable things. They defy all definition. And as a rugby nation, they defy definition. You can go and ban Fiji. Fiji just give you the middle finger and go to Hong Kong anyway.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And I think World Rugby and a few of these outfits, they know that. I mean, Fiji's general stance is, this is a region that cannot be governed by anybody else but us. We'll do what we like. We'll go where we like. We'll play who we like. And what's the answer to that?
Yeah.
You can't ban a team like that, because it's like, oh, okay, everybody that's right-handed in the NBA can no longer shoot anymore. Don't be daft.
Yeah.
And then then the knock-on effect is quite simply this: Hong Kong and Fiji get together. Well, New Zealand's obliged to turn up, because New Zealand can't win a tournament without Fiji there. That's not how you win a tournament.
Right.
So where they go, we have to go. And wherever we go, the Aussies tend to go, which is a pain in the ass. And the Box come along as well. And then the English want to be in on it. And then, it's fucking this, that, and the next thing. Boom, there you go. You've got probably the top 5, 6, 7 nations in the world anyway. So, World Rugby can think again about, banning. I'd love basically the Hong Kong Rugby Union turn around, give World Rugby the fucking finger and say, right, you got your World Series, you blokes, you can fuck off now.
Well, I mean, it seems to be a stop that's bigger than the rest of them.
Well, of course, it's the Wimbledon, it's the Everest.
Yeah.
It's the Indy 500, it's the Kentucky Derby, it's the place. You want to ball in sevens, you want to win in sevens, you want to be the best team in the world in sevens, win fucking Hong Kong.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Done deal. And if you can do it by beating New Zealand and Fiji along the way, holy shit, you're on fire.
Yeah, you're very, very relevant. And I think that to know like some of the behind the scenes stuff when the stuff comes out about Fiji, not being able to play players and stuff post Olympics because the sponsorship sort of ran out, and guys were going on tour knowing that they weren't going to make anything. And they're doing it, to honor the team and the country and wanting to be on the circuit. It's like, well, I mean, how can you tell someone what to do, and also not pay them? And those are the things I think need to be sort of considered in their decision, right? In allowing them to go to Hong Kong, where if it's a private event, if it's not a circuit stop and it's something else, maybe they get sponsored to go. And that's
look, it would never have been the World Series if they couldn't get Hong Kong in it.
Yeah.
To start with. And now that Hong Kong has supplied the gravitas and the glue to stitch it all together, and the meaning and the context and the reasons for being involved, now they've got the World Series. Now Hong Kong can go back to being what it was, which was fucking good fun. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's not fun now, but it's changed a lot. And in fact, the last Hong Kong Sevens I worked, it felt It felt like a sevens tournament in Hong Kong. It didn't feel like the Hong Kong sevens.
I see. Yeah, that makes. I know what you're saying there. Well, that's too bad. Hopefully we get back to it. And like you said, people are going to have to look at what they're doing and make adjustments going forward for everything. For all walks of life. So I hope that rugby in those places are able to bring some of that back. I think the first couple of tournaments that people are allowed to turn up to, if you can rock off a plane from anywhere in the world and go back to Hong Kong, it's going to be the next one's going to be, probably back to glory days.
Well, I heard Robbie, the CEO of Hong Kong Rugby Union, say that they kind of compared the Hong Kong Sevens to Mardi Gras, and I thought about that for a second. I think, of all the events in the world to talk about, he's probably got it. They probably fit that pretty much right, I think. There's a kind of cultural thing attached to it now after 40, nearly 50 years. And the centerpiece, which is the rugby, it's kind of like, well, take it or leave it kind of deal. People have come to Hong Kong, mate, year after year after year after year, and not even bought a ticket to the tournament.
Well, there's only 42,000 allowed in the stadium, I think, too, right?
Well, so they say.
Yeah.
So they say. I know people who have bought tickets every year and not even managed to get to the stadium. I've been one of them.
Too many obstacles from the hotel.
Oh, mate, sometimes you just get lost. Hong Kong has them.
Yeah, the mysticism. And then I had a chance to sort of look at some stuff and wanted to ask some questions. And one of them is University of Otago. You graduated. You did sort of media stuff, right? I mean, that's what you're in now, and broadcast media.
That is what I'm in now. My tale with broadcasting started when I was 12 years old because my brother was dating the local town radio DJ, and after a few years of that relationship, she said to me one day, because I was a fairly gregarious kind of kid, and she said, "Why don't you come up and do some stuff in the studio for us?" So it went from one morning a week telling a joke to 3 mornings a week telling a joke. And that ran for a couple of years until one of the teachers from a local high school sort of rang into the station and said, "Hey, look, that joke wasn't very appropriate." And fucking hell, I got busted doing that. So that was my time on air, sort of scratch, but that was enough to really kickstart a monster, and I just had a fascination for radio from that point on. So, I started writing, copywriting, and producing adverts for the local station, and I have had a relationship with radio studio pretty much since then. I was either on a footy paddock or on a sporting pitch of some description, in a bar or in a radio studio. Those were my the three places where I'd find myself most often. So the University of Otago, and indeed my Scarfy days, were like pretty much, I'd say 65, 70% of most New Zealanders. We were just down there on the piss.
Yeah.
And it was state sponsored as well because we had student loans. So, okay, this is perfect. It's a match made in heaven. You give people in the early 20s the wherewithal to constantly get on the piss, and we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll give it a good old shake. And we did. And I enjoyed my Otago University days. I don't even really recall going to that many classes. But in the end, I finished 6 years of first year papers. I didn't qualify for a degree, but it was makes for fairly interesting reading around the academic record side of things. So the thing was, I knew where I could make I knew where I could make money, and I could make money entertaining people on a microphone, or for a short period of time running around in short shorts on a rugby paddock. And I was under no kind of illusion that the rugby thing was going to wrap up at some point in the future. So I just sort of kept ticking away with the creative side of myself in the radio studio. And one of the things that sort of fell out of that was a really strong interest around technology and its effects on broadcasting, and looking down the line, figuring out where the 2 points converged, or perhaps maybe where they separated. So that's, the university years were very, very much about rugby. We're about social, being real social, getting up to a few hijinks, and sort of cutting my teeth in the broadcasting game. At the end of the 90s, I flipped out of Dunedin, and that's was a big move because I'm a southerner born and bred, and born in Invercargill, raised in Central Otago, down in the Big Smoke in Dunedin for varsity. So I'm all the way south, and then I jumped on the plane and went up to Wellington for a decade, which was a reasonably bold move, because at the same time, a lot of my friends, a lot of the guys I went through university with, they were all going on OE, so they would jump and ship completely up to the UK and playing rugby and bits and bobs up there. But by the end of the 90s, I was done with footy. I'd sort of had my breaks and stuff like that. I'd entered the NPC as an 18-year-old while still at high school, and went through, got my Blazer game there, and then I actually went away to Australia for a couple of years to play some semi-pro rugby league. Came back to New Zealand in 95, and I guess 95, 96, I was still probably in the hunt for trying to make representative rugby, but as I mentioned, I'm from the south. I'm blue and gold. I'm Otago all the way, and I guess when it became pretty clear to me that I was never going to play for Otago, despite the opportunities around the place, the game lost its appeal for me, because the thing I most wanted to do in rugby was to represent my home province. And when that opportunity was not going to happen, it became a different game after that. So I wrapped up my footy probably 2001, 2002. In fact, I remember that quite clearly. I was watching Ren and Stimpy, which was part of my dial-up routine every Saturday. And I realised I was having more fun watching Ren and Stimpy than I was going to be playing the fucking game later that day. So I got on the blind of the cage and said, "Hey, fucking hell, put the pin in, I'm done."
Yeah.
And then that was here. So yeah, a cigar in port before 11 o'clock that morning. And then we burnt the boots. We burnt the boots the week after. So
yeah, that's it's funny how those sort of opportunities sort of present themselves, and a fair few front rowers come through Otago in that time, right? Like,
I remember down there, bro. And let me just sort of shake this down for you. So I've been playing for North Otago, and I debuted at second 5'8" in 91, and got my Blazer game before the end of the 92 season. And then the Otago guys rang up in the back channel and said, "Hey, come down to Dunedin." And I went down to Dunedin, sort of not really knowing what they wanted me to do. I got down there and they put it on me that they wanted me to become a front row forward. Now, what was happening was I was playing midfield for North Otago on the NPC, and I was playing first 15 on the Saturdays as a loose head prop. So, as you can imagine, you can do that. I mean, I was a bit bigger than most of the blokes in my first 15, so that put me in the front row. But then, conversely, when you flip it over to senior men's rugby at representative level, I was matching the midfielders, so they put me there, kind of that kind of work. When it came to make the hard call to go from midfield to front row, I was like, I'm a bit underdone as a front row. Give me 12 months at a fairly competitive level, which in Dunedin at that time Colts was. And had I maybe not made the decision to take a step down to Colts to learn how to scrum properly, and just got stuck into it from the word go. I might have set myself up a bit better to play for Otago, but that summer, I came into town. I think Joe McDonnell came into town. There's a guy called Nick Shepherd came down from the Bay of Plenty. Then the following summer, Anton Oliver turned up, Carl Hoff turned up, Case Muse turned up. The year after that, I think, then I shot away to Aussie. Then I came back in my first years back playing senior club rugby in Dunedin, sort of 96. And that's when Tom Willis was there. Carl Heyman was there. So it's like, okay, you could see them stacking up the talent pretty quickly. And I was felt myself going to the bottom of the pole pretty fast, but yeah, I mean, actually, that's probably not the inside of there is that Dunedin Club Rugby in that period between kind of 95 and 98 when they won the NPC. I mean, it was heyday sort of stuff. It was golden days in Otago Rugby, and we had 12 senior teams, maybe more, maybe 14. 6, 7 of those teams, maybe 8, were going pretty good. And in that top 8, there'd be 4 or 5 teams in that top 8 fucking flying, University A, they were just the club teams. Southern had Case, and Steve Maxwell, Terry Smith, and these guys. They've got All Blacks and Otago props and Otago Maori, and then I was playing for a club called Zingaree Richmond, the Dragons up on the hill. We had an All Black, we had 3 or 4 guys who were Highlanders, New Zealand A. One guy, Ross Mitchell, who was an open side flanker, he'd come from Hawke's Bay, where he'd sort of terrorised the Hawke's Bay team from loose forward, but couldn't quite get a fix there. Came down. He was, without question, the week in, week out, the best open side flanker in Otago Club Rugby. He would, on a lucky day, he'd be the backup 7 for the Otago B kind of deal. I think he played a lot of rugby in the end for Otago B, but cracking his way into the top team, tough to do when you got Josh Cronfeld there, and then Duncan Blakey, and so the talent going through the rugby in that period was just phenomenal. We'd be playing games, curtain raises of the Highlander games, we'd propping against All Blacks like Paul Miller and things like this. When you've got Case and Hofty on the sideline, sort of giving you a bit of a G up to make you go a bit better. So it's it was great times in Otago, and all those guys, wasn't really a bit of deadwood amongst them. They're good men, and it's been great to see them go on and have good careers, and good to see them all looking fairly well at this stage too. So
that is great. Something that sort of hit pretty recently with all the concussion stuff, and glad to know that those guys are doing well. But I mean, if you're playing 40 weeks out of the year, in an English club setting and playing in Europe and stuff, you've got quite a few more miles, I think, than someone that can look at it and say, hey, this is great. I've had a great time, but I'm not gonna abuse the body for abuse sake. So that's pretty cool. That's an incredible list of players that you've been through. And some of the first All Black games that I saw was Case Muse at tight head. Some rugby tapes that were given to me, VHS tapes, and they were Super 12 finals and things, semifinals and things like that. So watching those guys run around and trying to, as a young kid, a young man in America, trying to sort through it all, and I was like, wow, I'll play hooker. I should be like Jeremy Paul, right? I should just be rocking around and doing those things. And it's like, man, what an unbelievable player. He's like, oh yeah, well, I'm just gonna do whatever he does. But Case Muse was the first guy where it's like, I think I want to be a tight head prop. That's what I want to do. I want to anchor a scrum, and I want to drink for free after games. That seems like the life for me. And so that's what I did. Yeah, I chased that down.
Well, look, Case and I are very close friends. He's a ripper. He's an absolute beaut, and there's a lot of reasonably amusing stories I can tell about him. But I think, the thing about down south is that it's still quite an old school area of the country, and it doesn't suffer the North Island too well. All the flash Harrys from Auckland and all this kind of thing, and you kind of see these guys come in, and the old eyebrows go up and go, "Oh shit, here we fucking go again." And that north-south divide is real, and when you get down past Christchurch, is really real. So when Case arrived in Dunedin at the end of the summer, I'm thinking this must be sort of 95 going into 96. And he's turned up, and he's turned up to start work on the door at a pub that I was already on the door at, a part of the security team. And this place is called the Bowling Green Hotel. So, and it was one of the biggest beer barns in Otago at the time. You had the cook down on one corner, and you had the bowler down on the corner that we were working in. Case turns up for work, and he comes trotting across the car park. And I remember sitting down on the door looking at this guy coming across going, "Holy fucking hell, look at the state of this one." And he comes rocking up. Now, we had this security boss, and he was like a boot boy. He was like a punk, and had the spider web tattoos on the elbow and the whole bit. He was a power lifter. He was a very angry little man, and wore the Doc Martens, the whole bit. He was the fucking mate. He was the old romper stomper kind of deal. Yeah. And anyway, Case comes across. He's wearing this wife beater. He's got these 3/4 kind of denim jeans on and the Birkenstocks, all rigueur if you're from fucking Auckland. Yeah. And he comes trotting up to the door. Well, the skipper pokes his head through, looks him up and down, and says, "You can't fucking wear that to work. You can't put your fucking gears on. Come back." And Case fucking, it's like he had a fucking, he just, and there was no reply because, he'd been told to fuck off. So, back in the car, goes away, comes back about a quarter of an hour later, comes across, he's got his bloody work boots on, jeans, and he's got the green polo for the bowling green on, and he comes, next thing, the skipper's back at the front door, looks him up and down, says, "Yeah, that's better. Righto, you're fucking late." And I remember Case looking at this little white skinhead going, "What the fuck is going on here?" And so that was his welcome to the dirty South, and it was a very very amusing moment because I knew that I didn't have to do any of the fucking work myself then. But it's a stark part of the country, and once Case worked that out, he made every post a winner after that, and that sort of stoicism across the province was it's pretty prevalent in the team, and it's a big part of Southern rugby. The whole idea is, we may not have the big guys, we may not have the big budgets, but we've got thinking rugby players, which are the most dangerous, basically, and we'll have a go at you from that perspective. So, yeah, he came down, adapted quickly.
Yeah, yes, he did.
As you do, and he helped shape a few attitudes himself on the pitch. A few guys who thought they were going to teach him a lesson got the rework plan pretty quick, and it was great to see him go through the success he had with Otago, and then shame that he never really kind of reached the heights of lifting a World Cup, because he was clearly on his day, he was like one of the greatest props front rowers in the world. I mean, he was a prototype in many regards. You know, ball carrying guy, explosive. He was, you know, he was a sprint champion from Auckland in his younger years, and that showed, you know, over that opening 30 meters. If he could find a gap in that ABC region, he'd just tear teams to pieces. So great hands, could move the ball if he wanted to, could definitely catch the ball. So, you know, and there was no problems with him holding his side of the scrum up. I was told there was a game where he and Carl Heyman, who were playing club rugby together in France. It wasn't Carl Heyman, I think it was Carl Hoft. Ended up back to back on the 50-meter line, just drilling guys coming in because it had broken and the world had fallen apart and the French had started flying around. So these two Maoris went back to back and started smoking people.
They love a bench brawl in France, don't they? Like it's all, you know, very like sort of passive aggressive and like cigarette flicking, and then it's all handbags like out on the street, just going at it, full team brawls. It doesn't seem to be much in between. So that's
I mean, it's fair enough. They talk about themselves being passionate people. It's a fairly good indication. You know, you don't sort of warm up to it, but I think they know how to niggle.
yeah.
They know how to niggle. They know how to chip away. They know how to make a fucking nuisance of themselves.
Yeah.
And not only on the rugby paddock. And then I mean, look, I hear so many funny things about the French teams operate. Troy Flavel was telling me a cracker that, you know, they'd train a week and they'd be training the house down, and, you know, they'd get through the final training of the week and everyone would be fucking fizzing and tails are up. They're looking forward to Saturday. We're going to tear these blokes to pieces. The coach comes charging in the game on Saturday morning, throws the whiteboard up, and he's, you know, at the stoplight on the way down to the ground in the morning, he's had the fucking epiphany. He's up there, it's fucking on the board. We'll fucking run this play straight off the kickoff. And the guys looking at going, oh, and everything during the week had gone out the fucking window. Next thing you know, you're in the warm up trying to fucking practice the play. The coach is fucking run the play. And you get in there, there's a kick off. You try and run the play. Of course, you can't because it's fucking, it's a total rewrite of everything that's been done. And you know, the coach is just fucking apoplectic on the sideline going, what the fuck are you cunts up to?
That's one of my least favorite things, I think, you know, of all time is just watching a guy melt down. And it could be a guy walking into a lineout, you know, and last couple haven't gone well, and you can see the pressure sort of seep into the guy. It's like, okay, we're gonna. I was like, no, just don't do it. Like, let's just move the ball, right? Like, let's not jump in front of their 6'9" guys. Like, no, we're gonna change it. We're gonna like pulling guys around by the shoulders, like, get over here. We're gonna like, you just don't jump to the tallest guy, like. And the lineup never gets better, right? Like, it just goes.
Yeah.
Worse.
We'd surprise them by throwing it to them.
It's like, hey, maybe they'll knock it on. So that stuff like that is it's just funny, you know, as you exchange stories with people about how similar, you know, the game is, and sort of the personalities that are in the game on a team and a club, you know, sort of have these roles, and they're like non-negotiable. There's these guys and gals in every club, and everyone's got one. So that's great. Yeah, it's great to hear those things.
You know, I think the other thing is that I should qualify a lot of this talk about France, and that actually after the latest World Cup draw, I'm actually picking France and New Zealand to meet up again in the final.
Yeah, well,
I'm kind of picking France to win the final.
They're a very exciting team and very young, you know, watching them play. And then, you know, these kids that have come off the U20 team, you know, and they're just very complete. You know, they're dominating stuff in the scrum, which they've got sort of that computerized scrum machine where they only work about 30 minutes a week, which I think is pretty interesting, where they'll sort of use programming and pneumatics and recreate sort of scrum tactics by opposition. So they go in there very dialed in, and then a lot of physicality. The young back row, all these guys are like 6'5" and 6'6", and then just the typical French flair of like from 9 through 15, and very deep. They showed how deep they were against England. There was top 14 teams still sort of calling the shots towards their French national team in a way like where they're okay, these 35 guys aren't available to you. It's like, okay, well, I guess we'll take the next 20 and make it happen, and they went to overtime with England, who'd been pretty dominant, in most of the year, and outside of getting spanked in that World Cup final. So yeah, very, very interesting to see what they've got a lot of issues with who to play and who makes that team. So, but that's not a problem that.
Yeah, I think. Hey, look, I mean, when you talk about France, you talk about all these little kind of things happening in the background, and it's kind of, they make it sound really difficult, and I don't think it will be a case of that it being that difficult, because you've got, a group of these young guys who know that when they play together, they're world champions. And so in their mind, well, why not give it all up and be the world champions? Because when they come back, you're going to have to contract the world champion.
Right.
And this off the wall sort of emotive thinking is what really turns a French World Cup team into a fucking ballbuster, because all of a sudden it's them against the world. And it's not just them against the rest of the world, it's them against their own people who say they can't have this thing because of this contract and that obligation. It's like, no, fuck that. We got this thing that we're running here, me and the boys. That when a group of us get together, we've won world championships at junior level. We are a world championship team, and you're not going to stop us. And then all of a sudden, it all becomes very French from that point on. It may sound like, what the fuck are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. But I think anybody that sort of knows what they like, it makes all the fucking sense in the world.
Yeah. Well, I read stuff through my coaching and background, and looking at doing things like that. And some coaches will go so far as to not select players from losing sides, right? Like they think that winning is sort of a cultural thing and it's ingrained in you. And I think that the confidence, is just running out of those guys. It's just, they play with such confidence. They play, very strict on defense. They're giving away a few penalties, and then all that attacking energy. So it'll be very interesting to see, the lines of, who's the top 5, top 6 teams are sort of blurry right now, which as a rugby fan is very exciting to see. And it's too bad we can't get out and do some tours and those sorts of things and answer some questions. But those sorts of things, and like the Lions tour next summer, which
I'm looking forward to that.
We've really been hoping to go. I don't know, if we're going to be allowed to, as dirty Americans, leave the country, because our passports are got fucking cooties on them. Yeah, so we're going to be watching from afar as per usual. But then, again, like that, all the history of the Lions tour, and that would, in South Africa, like we're fizzing at the end of the year, and then now, they don't know what competition they're in, they don't know what time zone they're playing in. It'd be very interesting to see, answer some of these questions. I think it'd be very exciting.
Yeah, I think there's assumptions that makes some kind of has some sort of impact on South Africa. I don't really think it does. South Africa, the Springboks actually don't need to be playing in the Six Nations, whatever the fuck you want to call it. They didn't even really need to be playing in the Rugby Championship. The Rugby Championship, remember, is just a construct for a company like Sky Television to own some rugby product. It's not actually a real thing. The real things are Curry Cup. And Curry Cup was a tournament, or is a tournament, that supplied Springboks for, over 100 years. And it could go back to supplying Springboks for another 100 years. And that's what South Africa's got in the back pocket. They have got the Curry Cup. Now, if their players go nowhere, it doesn't matter. They go back to their regions, back to their province, back to their Curry Cup teams, and all of a sudden, you've got these dialed up, souped up Curry Cup teams again, ripping into each other on a weekly basis. I mean, I hate to say it, but during the boycott years, they didn't need teams touring, and they came out and started flogging people left, right, and centre, except for New Zealand. So, that's the reality. They've got an internal program. They've got a domestic program. It can turn into hardball. It is from the school of hardball. It's like in the NPC. New Zealand, again, at one point had 30 provincial sides and a competition where the team from 30 could go all the way to the top. If it just won, that's all it had to do, is win the rugby. BJ Lahore took, I think, Wairarapa Bush, through to the very top, which is just unbelievable scenes. So, New Zealand and South Africa have that asset in the background. People tend to forget about that because they get distracted by this international product. Well, international products, fuck all without domestic. And, both of those countries have got the domestic, and, you've got to have huge respect for the Curry Cup, massive respect for Curry Cup, because of the players that it produced, not just the ones that we know about from the modern era, but, you can take all the way back in that start of that Springbok jersey and Darnie Craven and Stellenbosch University and things like this. I mean, it's just sort of blows your mind, really, when you go down to Stellenbosch and you go into Marty's and have a look inside that club rooms, And there's two jerseys there when you walk on the front. When you walk in there, there's the Maori jersey and the All Black jersey above the doorway when you walk into that club. I mean, that's a university team.
Yeah, would have been. I mean, they have such a long tradition, and I think that I was talking to, he's a Welsh guy, but he lives here in America for the last 20 years or so. His kids are American, and we were talking a little bit about rugby, and he shared a clip with me, and said, it was just Rassie Erasmus, right? Like just telling them, before the Japan game, in that quarterfinals, it's like, we're just gonna fucking bully these guys, like we're gonna show them that this is our, this is they want to adopt rugby. Rugby is everything to us, and we're gonna go out there and make sure that they feel, like how much the physicality, I guess, is always going to be the first thing, sort of the first box to tick, right? And I mean, they sure do have quite a bit of that there. Like it's something that is part of their game from early on, and even smaller players. So I work with a guy here in San Diego. He's South African, small, in stature, scrum half, and he's, he just sort of like looks around and sort of demands it from you. Like, he's not going to do it. You're going to do it, but like, you're going to get your ass in there and go in there and then, like, please get this guy out of here, like just use your shoulder and whatever. And just get this guy out of please, here. Just looking at you pleading, like, please, can you get, like, he's in the way, right? As a boy, like, he's a great big Polynesian guy. It's like, well, fuck him, get him out of the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just like with the little whip, just get going, get in there.
The power of the Springbok pack, and the brutality of that forward pack has really created the All Blacks that we've seen today. New Zealand took some heavy defeats in South Africa at the hands of that forward pack prior to World War II, and coming out of World War II, we got clowned by them a few times as well. So that pushed New Zealand into looking at how it could sort of turn the tables, and from that thinking, you get Fred Allen and the team that he put together, that 68 sort of team, at 65, 68 side, and you'll hear talk about the All Black teams of modern times and how they've got this winning record, they've won that many international matches and stuff like that. If you compare them to that 68 side and the feat that they won 17 test matches in a row in 68 in that area. Now, doing that's back then when sometimes you'd only play once a year. Having a team that could sustain for that long, and play the Springboks as well. I mean that whole ass kicking that we took in the early part of that century really forced New Zealand to sit down and figure out how the fuck it was going to deal with these guys. And in the end, we found players like Colin Meads, Bunny Tremaine, Sid Going, Will Curtin, Wilson Winery. These sort of characters who are just icons in the New Zealand game. Pine Tree Meads is probably the first name in the game for many people. That was the result of how we were going to deal with the box, and we didn't really give a flying fuck about anybody else. Maybe the Lions when they came to town. The Lions only came to town every now and then. It was the Box of the year. They were a problem constantly. So this All Black thing that we're dealing with today is the resonating solution that we came up to with to try and deal with the Box back in the day. That's how great that nation is at rugby.
Yeah, it's just so much history, man. It'd be really interesting again, like to see them play a match every once in a while. And I hear a lot of people sort of whinge about like playing too many games against them and making it more special of an occasion, that sort of thing. I mean, how does that sit with you? What do you think, like sort of a one-off, once a year, or home and away? I guess it's pretty far away to do home and away.
Yeah, I don't know whether I still like the idea of South African touring New Zealand one year and New Zealand touring South Africa the next year kind of thing. Can a 12-month period go by where I don't see a Bock All Black game? Actually, you know what? Yep, can. It can open the doorway to have France tour us again in New Zealand. I mean, those international tours were what I grew up with when I was a kid, and they were pretty cool, to be fair. Of course, there was times when that sort of didn't happen. We didn't get like they're talking, 14, 15, 16 games on average for the All Blacks in a year.
Yeah.
Do I need to see them a dozen times? No, not really. As long as you see them win, that's all they got to do, kind of deal. But I mean, unfortunately, there's a reformation that's going to have to come along at some point in time for rugby. The guys that exploit the game now have got such a ironclad grip on the international side of things that, I think to a certain extent they've kind of wrung it to death. And the early indications are probably these court cases that are coming up or have just been announced with Steve Thompson and company. I had heard about them going down. I heard about them a number of months earlier that there was a bit of reckoning coming down the line for this whole thing. So it's going to be pretty fascinating to see how it sort of pans out. And it's sad that it has happened. It's sad, very sad that these guys have got injuries that may or may not be caused by rugby union, but they've got to live with them anyway. And I think the game could do itself a hell of a lot of favours by just hearing them out and then supporting these guys, regardless of where the responsibility is. People might say, "Oh, that's not a commercial reality." Well, no one wants to get their head fucking caved in. That's just a human reality. So, if it's truly the game that's inclusive and it cares about everybody and it's all about team and what have you, then it should be taking care of these guys because they have, it would appear, on the surface of things, given more than just blood, sweat, and tears. They've had their lives get flushed because of the game. So, it's a gnarly one, but I think just this, there's the current I'm sort of pointing to is this really hardcore exploitation of athletic talent that professionalism drives. and the game doesn't help. The way the game mechanics are set up doesn't help either, with the tackle and ruck laws the way they are. I mean, you've just got guys who are just sitting targets at the moment, and you see the result of some of that stuff now.
Yeah, I've talked about it a few times on through here, and my day job is working for a company that was invented to help sort of prevent head, neck injuries and concussions. So, on a good thing about it is I get to talk to lots of different kinds of people about it. The bad thing is that it happens in lots of different kinds of sports, in this sort of early onset of
Yeah, well, I mean, I sort of hadn't really considered too much. It kind of seemed like, apple dislodges from branch, falls on ground. It's that simple, you would have thought. And then, you start seeing some of these studies coming out of Italy that just point to the fact, just playing organised sport can lead to the onset of dementia and things like that. People playing social football. I mean, I don't mean rugby, I mean football. Yeah. And then it's kind of like, well, I mean, okay. So you may be able to sign rugby up beyond doubt to, playing rugby equals dementia law at some point, but I don't know if it really shows beyond any reasonable doubt whether it does, considering some of the sort of reports you're seeing about other sports that aren't rugby.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like to your point, is if it's an inclusive game and these guys have sort of carried on, these are international players that have sort of carried the game along and through World Cups and those sort of things, then there should be a resource for players. And I mean, education is great, like we need to educate coaches so that when something like that happens, you don't send someone back out there, right, to go get teed up again. Because, I mean, they take you off the field because if you do have a concussion, they take you off because if you get another one, you could die on the field. So I think that sort of that, how do you educate every person in every club? Like, I don't know how to do that. But
well, hey, look, you do what you can. You fix the fence at the top of the cliff, as you're talking about, which sounds like where you're at the moment. Unfortunately, there's been a few guys get off the cliff before you've had a chance to put the fence up. And it's really about what's going to happen to those guys.
Yeah.
And then you've got the bit in between, which is like, not everybody wants to be saved.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants. I don't want to come off the pitch. We're at fucking 65 minutes into this game. We're deep in the shit. We're neck deep in it. I don't want to go. I'm not leaving these guys behind.
Yeah.
I'm in it. I'm not going. You're not pulling me.
Well, we've all been that guy too,
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? If someone said, "Hey, look, you've got some long-term things to think of," hey, man, take your long-term and get the fuck out of it. We're in the fight here.
Yeah.
Because you're living. You're living in the moment. You're living that moment. You want to be in that moment, and you want to. And those are the moments that you reflect on in the clubhouse until you're too old and stupid to remember exactly what went down. That day that you ran 145 meters through the car park, you sidestepped the lady at the fucking corner, came back in, chip and chase for 95 meters, scored his 10-pointer. That's is that what happened?
The way I remember it, yeah.
The way I remember it, yeah. Someone might remember it different, yeah. Caught the ball, fell over.
Pulled my hamstring as I jogged on.
Yeah.
One of those.
But you can see it's like here's the problem with human beings, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what they've always said about rugby. It's a very simple game until human beings get involved.
Right. Yeah, it should be anyway. Well, just to switch gears a little bit, we talked a couple of things like this, and again, like listening to your stuff since 2007. Listening to you place. You had a TAB bookie on the show at one point, and he would give odds on games. We listened to European 2 championship scores, those sorts of things. Ross Filippo would come on and give his little bits about what was going on in Wellington. But like as a guy like Carl Heyman, right? So like Dan Carter has sort of set up the ground, the framework, which some of these guys are doing now, and is sort of setting up this like sabbatical from the All Blacks, and so they don't have to sort of choose right between the money and being an All Black. But it's like Carl Heyman, like a lost like national treasure, did he shoot away to France and to Newcastle, and like everyone was just sort of going like, what just happened? Like we had a shit results, like the worst result in World Cup history in France, and then he just didn't come back. And I always wondered what that was like, because I was in New Zealand in 2011, and missed you. We sort of meant to see you. My wife and I were in New Zealand. We meant to see you at the Green Man. We had a shit housing situation the night before.
Oh no!
And we had to skip town, and we went up to New Plymouth and stay with some people. Absolute Rip River story, just like how out of the way people are nice to you in New Zealand. But yeah, like just thinking about that, like he was there, he was the highest paid rugby player in the world, and he wasn't in New Zealand. And
yeah.
I just wondered what that would have been like, because we were there when Dan Carter tears his adductor in a kicking practice, and the place we were staying was in Nelson, with a family called the Thornleys, and they run a lot of the Tasman stuff there.
Okay.
For the Makos, and they plugged in the radio, and then the teletext was going, and we were going back and forth. Do you want some coffee? Yes, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, great. I'm gonna make some coffee. And then it was like, what just happened? It was like Dan Carter out 10 weeks, surgery required. And then we all like by then we'd been there long enough where we all instinctively turned the teletext and we're reading it like, oh shit, he's done. Like he's all the way gone. And then it was just like this thing where people were calling into the radio just going, we're cursed. We're never gonna win. We're never ever gonna do it. I was like, well, yeah, fuck the other guys on the team, right? Like they can't do it. It wasn't like they were just somebody. It was like the whole All Black squad minus one guy. Like we're done. Like it's never gonna happen. And I was just like, what is it? Like it's a checkbook and an adductor tear, and like that was it. Like that was the whole world was over.
Well, I'm glad you're a glass half full kind of guy.
They made it happen, right? Like, I think if you watch that game, final two,
when Stephen Donald come over and kicked that fucking dirty old dead duck over the fucking, it was just like wearing a fucking school uniform. He was like 5 sizes too small. He was about 10 kilos overweight, running with an ass as big as a wheelbarrow. Fucking hell. Look, it was amusing, wasn't it? It was all fucking boom.
Well, the next week, like Colin Slade goes down, same injury, right? So it's like, all right.
I think the New Zealand dollar might have dropped about 3 or 4 cents.
I think so, yeah. And like he was all vague, he was all white bait fishing, right? Like he was gone, like no phone on.
Yeah, exactly right. He had the pip and gone bush. Yeah. So that was pretty amusing. Yeah, look, when Carl Heyman pulled the pin on New Zealand rugby, first of all, couldn't blame the guy at all, between sort of, things become kind of unbearable, really, All Black fan-wise. We'd been dumped by France in 99. We'd had a terrible tournament in 2003 with John Mitchell. And what was that? Yeah, what was the year 2003? Was it Mitchell?
Yeah. That was Sydney.
And that was when, we got beaten by Aussie and they sent Jerry Collins out to basically apologise on behalf of the team. And it was kind of like, well, JC went out there and just terrorised the Aussies and probably had his man of the match for New Zealand. And now he's got to sort of shimmy out there because the leadership haven't got the balls to go out there and do it themselves. So, all's not right with the New Zealand frame of mind. And then we hit 07, and as good as that group was, there was still this kind of lack of maturity around the coaching group. It seems strange to say that with Graham Henry and that guys on board, but they were playing favourites. In 07, Aaron Major, he should have been on the pitch but wasn't. Nick, Snapper, what's his fucking last name? the
Fucking
so-called
Nick
backup.
Evans.
Nick Evans, he should have been on the pitch, not Dan Carter, because he was on form. We just made really sort of lame kind of selections based on rep rather than reality. And, had we maintained a really tough line on who was, on form ahead of reputation, then, would we have won? No, but would we have felt better about losing? Possibly. And then the New Zealand reaction after 2007 was just, New Zealand fans' reaction, I should say, after 2007 was just fucking ridiculous. I mean, Christ. It's, the country just turned into a bunch of wankers. And, I know that there was some negotiations. It's sort of, from what I remember, Carl had told the New Zealand Rugby Union what he was after, and they decided that they weren't going to give it to him. So he was, and look, what he was after in real terms actually wasn't that significant, but they decided that they knew better, and he shot off into the fray, and he ended up making those big bucks in France and things like that, and as a result, another guy that never really tasted the kind of international success he should have, but I'm pretty sure that everybody that locked horns with the guy from when I did it in Dunedin to when he finished doing it in France, pretty much thought to themselves, fucking hell, I can this is one of those propping days that it can be either really easy or it can be either really, really tough, so I'm just going to lean. And he was a polite guy, mate. He would, when he figured out that you were just there, he wouldn't have to do much more than that. Then everything was fine. But if you wanted to fire a shot over the top, he'd fucking come back with one. Holy hell. It was like locking down with a bit of wood.
Yeah. I mean,
it was gnarly.
Doing stuff, kinesiology in my degree. And so we'd spend a lot of time watching gym stuff, like what do they do in the gym, and just blowing up squat racks and, those sorts of things. But was a very skillful player, was a great big guy, which was sort of new to propping, was sort of have this like 6'4" frame, but like obviously very strong, and worked hard on a lot of stuff.
It's fascinating, isn't it, when you look into the depths of those sort of things, and you get, I mean, these changes in body types are almost responses to changes in rules and regulations. It was that's how kind of detailed now, or detailed they were looking at things. I mean, when the rules in terms of pre-engagement in 1995, 96 were way different than they were in 2007. And that whole idea of having the longer back at 3, because it was following along the likes of Craig Dowd, who was another very tall tight head prop. The idea was, okay, we can promote 3 here because this guy's the taller guy, and make them reach for the shorter guys standing at loose head, which is, if you've got the ability to, I guess, have a very tall, long, tight head and a even just an average loose head prop, when the squeeze comes on, you can really attack. I mean, you have as a shorter loose head prop, you've got to really attack a longer guy to buckle them up a bit.
Yeah, and you get a sort of an automatic promotion of the right shoulder, right? Just as you sort of sink into it. And then response, like a guy like Andrew Sheridan from England, right, was sort of the response to that.
Mate, what a whopper that guy was, wasn't he? Unbelievable.
He looked like he hated everyone too, like just running around looking like the Hulk, trying to smash and grab everything. I remember watching that World Cup, and like they play Australia in the quarters, I think, and Matt Dunning, was still there, and first scrum of the game parks him on the second row, and then stands up over the top of him, and there's a bit of like collar grabbing, and it's like like Dunning was like not even to like nipple line on his chest, you know, he's looking straight up into the air at him. It's like, oh, I'm gonna fuck you up. It's like, no, you're not
Yeah,
today.
well, I mean, that game was an interesting game, wasn't it? I remember looking, I was standing in a pub and not an Aussie bloke next to me. And there was a point there, I think, it might have been Gregan caught with the ball, and it was 20 minutes from the finish, but you could tell that was it. The momentum had swung, and it was Aussie were on the way out of that World Cup. And I remember turning around just laughing at this Aussie bloke, not realising that not more than 4 hours later I'd be going, fucking hell. So the call on the commentary that night was, hold on to that plane, Aussie, we're coming with you.
Yeah. Hold the door. Yeah. I wonder how fast they leave town too.
Well, I don't think there was many All Black. It was pretty much a ghost ship that turned up in New Zealand after that. I mean, there was a lot of blokes got off straight away. Carl obviously didn't come back, and Dougie Howlett, sure, he wasn't going anywhere initially, and he ended up in Ireland of all fucking places. But there might have been a dozen of that squad actually make the final trip home.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and that in the end that was reflective of just how ridiculous the New Zealand response had been. We at that point it had become pretty clear that we'd gone from being rugby supporters to All Black fans.
Sure.
And there's a subtle difference to what I'm saying there.
Yeah, we get a taste of it too, right, between the Argentina loss and the Wallabies draw. And I just remember, and just so you had those feelings, right? Like you watch enough games and or enough fights or whatever, and you sort of like reading the body language, and it's like, man, like something's gonna happen here. And I remember Kerwin saying in the week on the show, they're live in New Zealand, like, they've all had COVID, they haven't played a game in over a year, like surely we can beat them. Why are we going to put out our best side against these guys? And then 25-15 happens, and this same guy and the same people that were like, yeah, we're going to smoke these guys, turning around, just like shredding them, and I just, it's unbelievable. Like when you're at the top, like so much is expected of them. I don't know if there's really an equivalent here in America. Like you get bits of it, and American media, it can be very vicious and intrusive, but I think that, a country of 4 million people, like when you come home to that, like there is no hiding, there's no, like, I'm going to go to my mountain retreat or I'm going to go to Mexico. There's nowhere you're going where like, you're going to be, like, oh, I'll get a week away from this, like I think that you're sort of dropped into it. And you've got to swim to the edge, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. It'd be hard to find I'm pretty cynical about the media's input into this situation.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a fair and reasonable kind of thing to say that it's all just the fans. They get promoted into this kind of way of thinking, which is a do or die kind of arrangement. Either we're happy because we win, or we're angry because we lose. Whereas you should be, maybe an alternative way to think is be happy about winning and then happy about losing as well, because we've seen something that doesn't happen very often, and B, we've got a great opportunity to learn a bit about what we don't know, because it's what you don't know that you don't know that you've got to go and find out. So it's a worry that supporting a sport and a team has to be broken down into such a binary kind of decision. I don't place the blame of that on the punters themselves. I lay it at the feet of the media, because I kind of feel like they can actually be doing a lot more pretty lazy representation of sport. It just makes it easy for them to, okay, well, let's build a narrative around winning's good, losing's bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that there's a certain point, like as a kid, you're playing and you cry and you get upset when you lose, and then like at some point, you'd be on a pitch in a big game, like, cried for not getting enough playing time, internally, like just sort of moping, to myself, like I wanted to play in this big match, I only played a few minutes, whatever. You get upset in the hotel and you have a drink and then you go out and you shake it off. But like being on the field and losing a game, like there's a point where you just appreciate what you've done, like that you've made that game, you've made that final, you've gone out and you've competed. And I think that, like everyone should expect to win, but like the reality is that there's only one team that's going to win on the day. And I think that competition, not knowing if you're going to win is what makes it so special, and why people sign up to do, anything, but especially a game where you slap skin for 80 minutes. And 98% of us will pay to do it, not being paid to do it. So it's crazy to think of that, how much expectation can sort of ruin things, as far as like the feel, like losing is bad enough, but then to have to sort of sit around and feel bad for these guys and talk, just trying to do their job, trying to be a rugby player and be normal humans.
Yeah, I mean, look, you get this, you get this, mate. It's I think we're starting to see some of the negative traits of modern rugby, not just from a physiological point of view, but from a psychological point of view as well. There's a lot of guys who finish damaged from international rugby and professional rugby. They've lived for a period of time in total isolation to what the real world's like. It's as a full-on training pro, you're just not exposed to some of the kind of rigors of day-to-day life, and when you're no longer part of that world, it seems that the abilities to deal with it are not developed. One of the most kind of interesting stories is AJ Venter, the Springbok. Fantastic rugby player, tough. Oh my lord, tough as fuck. Proper hard man of Springbok rugby and of South African rugby, and an absolutely delightful guy. You never meet a nicer guy. But by Christ, he was the devil wearing six when he played for South Africa, man. He was a real bit of work. And, post-match or post-career, his life just got thrown into turmoil because, he'd climbed that mountain. He'd been at the top. And when the curtain came down, he was no longer at the top. In fact, he wasn't. He found himself exposed on all sides, basically, and had to suffer. I guess if you wanted to call it give it an umbrella term, like normalization. He had to basically start again as an ordinary human being.
Yeah.
And to the guy's credit, to his absolute credit, he has, pieced himself back together and now is helping people understand how to live their lives. The guy's just got great qualities. It took him some time to work it out, but he worked it out, and it must have been tough to do it. But we know he's really tough, and not only physically tough, but he's mentally tough and he's emotionally tough now as well. So he started a podcast, and I've noticed over the last few years this concept of transitional storytelling is helping guys from that sporting world find their way back to kind of normal life. But it serves the question: what if the sporting world and normal life is so different? What's made it that way? And in my opinion, what's made it that way is that their talents have got to be exploited. That exploitation is done through marketing. That marketing mechanism or apparatus is the media, And there's a way that they seem to be doing things that are just separate, that have slowly, incrementally separated these guys a long way from where normal life is sort of at. And there's absolutely zero concern about them when they play their last role and the curtain pulls and they pull the tents down and move the show on. These guys the next day, they wake up and they're like, where the fuck am I?
Yeah, and it is. And then, like, obviously we've got that in America and in the many professional sports we have. It was something that I thought was, something that New Zealand especially separates itself with people of other countries, is that sort of inclusiveness and having a role in society, and like just being genuinely humble, because there's this, the back of the mind, they know that rugby is fantastic. If you're an All Black, you're a rock star there, but you will come to an end, right? Like, you won't always be an All Black. You'll have to move on and be a part of that. And I thought that was something, very different, how approachable they are, like seeing Kieran Reid at a farmer's market in Christchurch when we were there. And he's just sort of politely asking, like, hey, like, could you pass a bag? And like, yeah, of course I can, like, I know who you are. And like, there's no ego about it whatsoever. They're just there getting groceries and you're next to the bag. Like, so I thought that was something completely different, coming from America, where like we're in LA and, someone quasi-famous comes to the airport, there's like a mob around them and people are, fanning and trying to get autographs. I was like, yeah, it's Adam Carolla. I'm like, yeah, like, great. Like, he's taller than I thought. But like, that was like the most interesting thing about it, like, okay, like, he's on TV. Yeah, no, I get that.
Look, maybe New Zealand, maybe they do it better in New Zealand. I'm not entirely sure. Having a very small population obviously has some advantages to it, but it's not like All Blacks are immune to the situation either. I mean, that pro lifestyle is not one that's replicated at any level, really, in New Zealand society. And for me, there's a concern that now New Zealand, the media is starting to go after. Well, they're showing secondary school rugby, which I think is probably going to end in tears long term, because we're talking about building pressure on young guys and things like that. It can't be anything worse than being 17 years old and lining up a match-winning penalty in the final game of the season that's being shown nationwide on TV, and shanking it and missing it, and the team loses. I mean, that's that's scarred for life, really.
Yeah.
So, these games that they're showing for the secondary school teams, I mean, that some of these young guys will start playing first 15 rugby in New Zealand thinking that being on TV is a right rather than a privilege.
Sure.
And they're also looking into having South Auckland under 21 rugby, which is the Sir Michael Jones Cup. Again, a great idea to have the Sir Michael Jones Cup. Is it a great idea to have it broadcast on television? And the reason I say that is because, well, I'm on TV. I'm a rugby player in this Colts division. All of a sudden, you've got ghetto superstars getting around, and I don't think, sure, I might be going after all the negatives here, but it seems that they're the ones. These are the things that we get to see. I've played enough semi-pro sport and sport, rugby and rugby league below the top line to see all the habits and the cliches that are exposed in the top line. They're all parroted at the levels below.
Yeah. One of my some good friends of mine that I've made are the Pig Athletic Club out of Brisbane, Australia. They're quite dynamic on social media and big fans of Bangkok Tens and touring to Vietnam, those sorts of things. And,
yeah, I know these guys for sure.
Yeah, they're epic. So they came to Missoula, Montana, a couple years in a row for the Maggot Fest, which is America's sort of
okay, yeah, that's pretty
social
famous.
rugby stuff. 48 teams from America and Canada, all sort of converge on this small college town in the mountains there in Montana, and it gets weird. So it's a great time, trying to talk to them. These guys go to Bangkok, they go to Hong Kong. We asked them, like, what's and I decided to sort of casually, having a smoko and just like, hey man, where does this rank? And those types of things. And he's like, oh, this is way crazier than Bangkok was. And I thought that was pretty interesting. But they have a lot of stuff on social media about that, sort of like, oh, the car that they tell you isn't in the semi-pro contract, a car, an apartment, and they got the car up on blocks in front of this, just absolute shit building that's falling down the side like of a hillside. Like, here's your apartment, like, congratulations, your match fees are also $50. They're like, great, thanks. Happy to be here, coach. But there's a lot of that sort of that bait and switch, and sport, I think, especially semi-pro, where funding can be very fluid, and expectations are still meant to be, like you said, they want to be on TV, they want to make it to the next level, but the training situation, the environment is obviously very different than those top tiers. I wanted to, there was one more question I had for you. Oh yeah. Just looking at like you've obviously played quite a bit of rugby, but you mentioned early on in our talk, that it was sort of looking past it almost at the end, sort of looking forward to other things. I have a good buddy of mine that started a nonprofit organization that gives scholarships to young rugby kids here in America, and kids can apply and basically cover their dues, right? So that a parent, isn't on the hook for dues and cleats and a scrum cap and all that. So he's done quite a bit of work to expose the community, to rugby, and having non-rugby events, or having going to a brewery and having a trivia night, or having a golf tournament. And in your opinion, in your experience, how can you get more of those people involved in the community, and how can rugby benefit from having non-players? You don't have to be a rugby player to be a rugby enthusiast, to cheer for a team or support a team or a club even, right? Like social memberships, that sort of thing. Like, is that I mean, again, like we talked a lot about professionalism, and I don't agree with James Haskell about many things, but one thing I will say is, taking care of professional players and player advocacy and sort of online bullying and those sorts of things, like, need to be sort of reformed in order to make athletes more like normal people, to your point, right? To closing the gap and sort of bringing them down off the mountain, or bringing us up to the mountain, like however you want to look at it, whatever perspective makes you more comfortable, right? Like, how do we build, in your experience, like what would you do, to expand on the rugby community?
Yeah, well, look, it's interesting. To speak to the point about normalizing the rugby guys, the whole idea of being pro is that you're completely focused on what it is that you're trying to do, and so they rightly put guidelines around things like if you're going to train here, you've got to recover here. And recovery is an interesting idea, because it means you're spending time letting the body restore itself after giving it a bit of a flogging. Makes a lot of sense. It's not really something that occurs in normal 9-to-5 life.
Right. Still got to go to work tomorrow, bud.
Still got to go to work tomorrow, buddy. Hey, whether you feel like shit or not, you're on the way. So, you build a resistance or a hardness to that aspect. Whereas, this idea of, by concept, professional athletes are at the margin. They're right out. They're at the 1%, 2% kind of area. They're out there fishing around looking for smarter, faster, better, stronger ways. The bulk of the population is just doing what it can to get by. So, is that what when you talk about bringing the athletes back towards the community, or the community up towards the athletes? Look, I'm pretty sure everybody that works 9 to 5 would like a bit of recovery time as well. So we can take some of theirs, and they had less. The pro athletes have less recovery time, and we get a bit more recovery time. Maybe they can consider just getting a little bit closer. But the reality is that I played in the shamateur part of the game, and we called it shamateur because it was a sham about being amateur. Now, I didn't make any money, really, but I didn't spend any money. That was the idea.
Right.
You know, you got a job. You didn't get paid that great, but you didn't have to pay for rent, and you didn't have to pay for food, and you didn't have to pay for petrol to get to training, and you got a car given to you, kind of deal. As long as you stayed injury free, you were pretty much good to go. And staying injury free just meant, you know, trying not to fall down a flight of stairs when you were pissed, and staying away from the forwards if you were a back, and you know, not losing a fight if you're on the forwards. All pretty straightforward. But the idea of, you know, going out and just finding the max, training to it, getting to it, holding, coming back, spending time isolated from the world so you can recover, so you go out and do it again. Because on Saturday, the idea was to get out there and really terrorise the opposition. You can start to see where the disassociation occurs. You know, if you're all of a sudden, you're all about that, with a little bit of recovery time to yourself, which you're not really spending with anybody else, you start to depart from kind of the real world. As amateurs, we were part of the real world at the same time. So, yeah, we played rugby and that was our focus. But if you were smart, you used your downtime to go and, you know, you went to meetings with the boss, you went and played rounds of golf, you know, with the regional manager, you went and did that, you went and formed relationships that were, as you started getting into the twilight of your game, which meant less appearances at representative level, more appearances at senior level and club. When that started that sort of balance started occurring more at club, you could be rest assured that she was pretty much curtains. But if you'd used your time properly, you would have, you know, built enough relationships, built enough of a network to help you find a career that you could step almost immediately into, and still play club rugby to a fairly good level, and still, you know, perhaps be on call if the province came back to you because they're on the shit somewhere. But you know, we didn't leave the working class.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with the pro sports guys, is that they're not in the working class anymore, despite what they think. And they can say, oh, you know, we do this, we do that, the next thing. They're still coming at it from a fairly privileged kind of way. They're not one of us. You know, good on them for having the talent to be that good. And you know what? Even if you dialed back and went back to Shamateur, these guys would still be at the top of the pole because they're that good.
Right.
So it wasn't such a bad way to start with. I don't think so. I think one of the great things about, and I don't know how I can say this. It seems like an almost fucking illogical thing to say, but one of the great things about COVID on Facebook has been the guys who have shown the old NPC clips from New Zealand. And if you look back, we look at mid-80s through to early 90s. Right, this is before the age of pro rugby. Now there's fucking afternoon rugby, the terraces are packed, there's men, women, children, there's sponsor boards, there's a TV broadcast, there's probably 3 or 4 radio broadcasts, all before they signed off New Zealand Rugby to Sky Sport. So the question begs, what improved after that? What improved after so-called pro rugby coming in? If this was the world before that, what was the massive advantage after that?
Yeah. Well, it was pretty cool to see guys like Artis Sevilla, you know, show up for Hawke's Bay and say, like, the All Blacks should be playing club rugby. You know, like I saw a couple of posts from him and from other guys, you know, like getting out there and putting on the jersey again. And to what you said, right, to your point, like getting out there and being one of the guys again. And I think that, you know, you get a picture of, you know, like Lee Halfpenny carrying a fucking tackle bag, you know, every once in a while. And it goes, yeah, sweep the sheds, you know, like, but like, what's it like to put the posts up, and line the field and open the bar and sell a t-shirt, all these things that go into the 98% of rugby that isn't, running out with flames shooting up and those sorts of things. Like, it's great. It's a great spectacle, but the game is still, I think, best in that scenario. What we're, it's the community is what makes it great.
I coached rugby for the Puniki Football Club at Wellington for 3 seasons, and had a fantastic time doing it. It's such a good club, and we're talking one of the historical clubs of New Zealand. The first All Black captain came out of this club. It's Dane Coles' club, actually. The model that they've settled around, I think, is a fairly good indicator of how it can be done for the future. And they've turned themselves more into a sports hub, whereas it's a piece of infrastructure that helps sports people throughout the eastern suburbs. So it gives inclusivity for people to come down and use the club and its training facilities and its F&B facilities to do what it needs to do. You want to run a conference, you can run a conference. You want to have a fundraising dinner, you can do that. If you want to come down and do some specific, video work on a particular athlete, that can be done no matter what the athlete does. They've got it set up for the local Olympic divers. They've got it, sort of special springboard apparatus and things like that. So these guys can come down, guys and girls, I should say, can come down and do some training when they can't get access to the dive pool next door. So, rugby clubs in New Zealand are struggling. They're struggling because of the decision for New Zealand to go professional. In order for New Zealand to become professional in terms of rugby, they had to go to they decided to take a centralised approach to the contracting of New Zealand rugby players. The only way to create that centralised approach was to then make the rugby union the centre of basically all the funding. To create that environment, they stopped the All Blacks playing for the clubs, because the All Blacks playing 20 times a year for the clubs would guarantee the clubs at the end of the day had 2, 3, 4, 500 people coming through the club rooms drinking on a weekend basis. Yeah. That made a lot of the clubs very financial. While they didn't pay anybody directly, it gave them the wherewithal to provide opportunities for up and coming representative players. They could maybe give a little bit of boot money out to the current guys and help them become more of a node in the community, because they were financial. So when the All Blacks were no longer able to play from them, the bank accounts went pretty dry there. They then turned around to the provincial unions. The provincial unions were getting handouts by the rugby union. They would then hand out to the clubs. Before too long, both the club's bank account had finished. The provincial union, their bank account's finished. And the only bank account that anyone can wait for is the New Zealand Rugby Union. And then that's how that was constructed. At that point, the central contracting was, fait accompli. So the concept that Puniki has is to open the doors, is to swing them open to the community. Yes, it's a rugby club, but it's got everything that anybody in any sport could ever possibly need, including a supporter base. Right. And so perhaps that's a mode or a position that rugby clubs can take around the world if they're going to be, growing communities around themselves. Why not grow the whole sporting community around itself rather than just the rugby part of it? And before too long, rugby does tend to win out as a game that people will follow, because if it does build the kind of people that it talks about building, then those those people end up being the kind of people you want to see succeed on the pitch.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't have the ability to edit any video, so probably gonna have to circle back around to you again sometime and have you back on and chat more with you. But I really thank you for taking some time and sitting down with myself, who like nobody listens to, and a few people are getting to know, I guess. But yeah, I really wanted to thank you again, and just, what a great chat it was, and I hope that we solved some of the world's problems here today.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think so. Couple of good-looking blokes like us, surely. But I'll tell you what, if this Lions tour goes ahead, I'm really excited about it, and I'm so excited about it that I'll definitely do an ARC for that test series with the Box and the Lions. So you heard it here first.
Well, man, we'll definitely look forward to that. The old days of trying to sync it up at the same time and starting the game over and yelling at my brother, and you're like, "Shut up! We're trying to get it all on there." Like, hopefully, we'll get the technology sorted out. But I'll definitely be listening to those ones. I was chatting with some people about getting out there and going to a Wagyu beef ranch and staying and catching a test, but I don't know if it's in the cards for us. But we'll wait for the great tour. I think that would be fantastic, and would love to listen to you.
Thanks for the invite, brother. Good to talk to you.
You as well. Thanks so much, Jed.